Welcome to Women of the World, a show which gives a voice to women from around the world who have chosen to make the United States their home. Our show believes in the principles written on and enshrined by the Statue of Liberty. Here's today's moderator, Amalia Moreno Damgaard.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Women of the World. I am Amalia Moreno Damgaard moderating today, along with co-host to my far left, Dawn Tomlinson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Semarit Strawn. Welcome, Semarit.
Thank you.
And to my right, Nadia Giprdana.
Hi, Amalia. I'm glad to be here today.
We are happy that you're here today as well. And today's special guest comes from Venezuela. Right. And I am happy to welcome Nora Hoff, originally from Caracas, Venezuela. And you and I have some commonalities. We are both from Latin America. We
That's
are both
correct.
Immigrants.
Right.
And you have had a very interesting career. And to start, I think it would be nice to learn a little bit about your background. I read that what brought you here is your father's career, to be specific. He worked for the World Health Organization, and that's how you ended up in Washington, D.C. And I'll let you take it from there. So maybe you can tell us what happened once you arrived in the U.S. and how different this was for you. You were the only one, I believe, in your family that spoke English. So
That
you
is
were the
correct.
voice of your family.
That is
so maybe
correct.
you can take us from there on your journey.
Sure. Coming to Washington, I had been learning English in a boarding school in England. And right from there, I went back to Caracas and we moved to D.C. because my dad was going to begin his work. And it was fun because I was so glad that I had learned enough English so that I could, communicate and do everything for the family. My mom knew a little English and my siblings knew a little bit, but not a whole lot. So, when you get to a country and you have to start by connecting the electricity and, doing really small things that can become huge if you don't have the language. So it was a fun time for me because I also found myself very useful to my family. And I am a second child, and we second childs have some issues sometimes.
I am fourth child.
You're first child, right. Anyway, so I did, and my siblings, the two little ones, started school right away. My brother had a little harder time because he was already a teenager. And
Were you a teenager at the time?
no, I actually had turned 18 the year before. So it was, and I had lived away from the family for a long time. I mean, a year and a half I was. So it was, I was very independent by then. You don't grow up, at least in my time, girls didn't grow up very independent in Caracas because, you are always with your sisters, your family. Even when you go to school, it was kind of restricted. It's very different.
We are a collective society.
Right, exactly, exactly. My grandparents lived just about 2 blocks away from us. So the family was always around you. And then when you went to school, everyone in the school knew your family and who you came, who your mom and dad were. So it was a very good community to grow up.
It was a happier time
Oh my
in the
gosh.
country at that time. How big of a difference was it?
Huge, huge. I grew up in a country that was, still beautiful, in a country that was very friendly. People in Venezuela were the most friendly people in the world, I think. And we, no matter what your economic status was, whether you were poor or very rich, people could talk to each other, and there was no harsh sentiments, and that's part of what has been lost, because there's been so much it's so much influence in the fight between classes, and all that was at the beginning of the Chavez government. I mean, we have gone now to a whole new level of killing people,
Yes.
and it's just
Political unrest.
it's
Total
terrible.
chaos.
Total chaos. I mean, people haven't had electricity or water for days on. Hospitals don't have it. So people are dying in the hospitals. It's just amazing. I am so glad my dad is not seeing this, because he worked in public health, and public health has gone to the pits. I mean, there is no
Access to
public
medicine
health.
or anything, right?
No medicines, no food, no water, no electricity. And then if you get out at night, it's very dangerous. Caracas has become, I think, the second most dangerous city in the world. And I think there are like 40 murders a day or something like that.
Wow.
It's really a dangerous. So people don't go out anymore.
Do you still have family there?
My youngest brother is still there, and I have one of my cousins that's still there.
Do you think your father caught hint that this chaos was coming?
No, because my dad died in early 2000, and like 2000 or 1999. Yeah, and he was kind of old, and he wasn't.
Right.
His mind wasn't all together, so he, thank God, did not. My mom, who was very alive and lively during her life and until she died, knew what was happening, and how much my dad had worked in improving the life of everybody, So I am glad he didn't see that, because it would have been
Yes.
terrible. And it is terrible, I mean, even now for us. Yeah. So Venezuela was a beautiful place. We would go to the beach, we could skate, roller skate in the streets during Christmas. I mean, it was just a very safe place.
So from the time that you left to the time that you came here, your experience changed in culture, in language, in traditions, in customs.
Yes.
And you started your life in the U.S. in Washington D.C. and you came to the Twin Cities eventually after some time.
After 30 years.
Yes.
I was in D.C. for 30 years, and my children were all born and raised in D.C., and they're all, well, two of them are still in the East Coast. So only my youngest moved with me to Minnesota.
And I think that your initial career in DC was in international development.
I did a lot of work with the embassy for about probably 10 years. It was a very good job to have when you have small children. The the schedule was like 9 to 3, the job I was doing. So that gave me help with the kids, with the children. So, and I did several things there. But I was under a diplomatic visa, which is convenient in some ways, but it also doesn't give you a lot of legal status. And when my marriage was breaking, I knew that I needed my legal status. So I finally applied to become a resident. And that was a huge thing for me, because, I had always been like different, right? And now I became a real immigrant then, when I had my my permanent resident.
Was it the marriage that gave you the first, because when you first came here, you didn't intend to stay. Was it getting married that made you decide to stay in the United States, or was that something else?
Yes, my family left. My mom and dad and the youngest kids left 3 years, yeah.
They went
3
back
years,
to
yeah, to
Caracas.
Venezuela. Yes, and I stayed because I was gonna, I was gonna marry my boyfriend, and we did. And the marriage was in Venezuela, so he got to know the whole family. So it was a very, very nice time. And his parents were very nice people. So they all went to Venezuela for the wedding, and we had fun. And my family loved them, and they loved the family. So it was always a very friendly, relationship. So it was very nice. I am not sure that I would have gone back, even if I wasn't married. I'm not sure. It could be because I also miss Venezuela. I had been away for a long time, like by that time it was like 5 years. And we didn't go back that much then because, we were small, we didn't really make a lot of money. My dad and my mom went to visit their parents, but
It's a big trip.
it is, and it was a big trip at that time.
It also sounds as if you've got a spirit of adventure. Beginning with your thirst to learn English and then
Right.
deciding, well, if the only school that's going to get me is in London, why not? I mean, that's a big
thing.
That's a big thing.
It was,
Yes.
and I think my dad didn't want me to leave the home. So we had to find a way that my dad would, say it's okay. She's going to a boarding school, all girls, Catholic school. So, but I'm telling you, the day I arrived at that school, I could not hear I could hear it, but I could not understand
Yes.
anything anybody talked to me. I remember waking up that first morning, and I had 2 roommates, 2 girls from England, and they would talk to me, but I was like, I have no idea what these girls are saying.
Well, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
It's amazing, but it was really a very good experience for me.
And I think that when you're young and you're exposed to that, you're more resilient.
Yes.
You're more accepting, and after a while, you are in a way absorbed by the culture.
At the culture. Yes, that is true. And I could not tell my mom and dad, I am so sad, I want to go home. Because, I had been telling my dad, I want to do this for about 2 years. So I had to do it. And, I lived with, in between years, I lived with a British family. And, I had a lot of experience. I was also involved in work with the Catholic Church, with all older people in London. So we would go visit. So, I learned a lot about the country that is not the tourist part.
Right.
So it was a very good experience for me.
It's
And then
so-
they said, we're leaving, so you need to be here and help out with the family so that, we could move.
It sounds like that part of your life really set you up for the rest of your life, making a commitment and keeping it, having that sense of perseverance,
Right.
taking on new things.
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah.
And that whatever I decided to do, I could do it.
Yes.
So it gave me a inner strength.
And I think that's what I was wondering about, that your decision to stay in the U.S. after your family left might have been influenced by this readiness to experience new things. You know,
Yes.
I just barely got here, even though it was 5 years. Maybe I want to stay.
Stay here for a while and see.
That also contributes to making you grow faster, becoming an adult much faster.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
came as a very young adult, and I had no family here. Virtually, my brother lived in another state, and that's still the case today. But I think that forces us to mature
Yeah.
faster and
Very much
fend
so.
for ourselves.
Fend for ourselves,
Because
yeah.
we find out that we have
That this
no
is
choice. We have
We
no
are it.
choice. So I think that is a good thing. It makes
Yeah.
us stronger.
Yes,
right?
I agree. I agree.
So at some point you started becoming interested or involved in international development, and that brought you to St. Catherine University here in...
Actually, no. The company I was working with in Washington, D.C., after I left the embassy, was a company that was doing work all over the world. And they were doing things in Central America, actually, in Honduras. And, I had the opportunity to take a trip to visit the Contras. At the time, the Contras were very strong in Honduras. So it was really interesting work. I was in the human resources office, but because I also spoke Spanish, I went in one trip that was an incredible experience for me, walking in the jungle, being really afraid too, because,
You can't do that today.
No. So and that company was mostly, and then they grew. It was a company actually founded by 4 women. And most of the employees were women. So it just started giving me also that sense of women can, and we can do it, and it's a good thing. So that was very important. And that was really reinforced when I started working at St. Kate's. Because St. Kate's is an all-women's university. So that was really very,
Very fitting.
very fitting.
How did you find St. Kate's to begin with?
Well, I came, we got married, and I came, and for a year, I said, I'm just going to chill it. I'll stay home and chill it. But, that wasn't very satisfying. So I started looking for a job. And I interviewed several times, but, most of the jobs I interviewed, and this was 1992, the cities was a very different environment at that time than it is now. It is, I think, much more diverse now than it was at that time. So a lot of the places I applied and had interviews with, I said, I don't feel comfortable, I mean, first of all, they were mainly men.
Yes.
And then it's just like, it wasn't a good fit. So then I started at St. Kate's, and when I started, it was a really a small job and a small salary, but it was a place where I actually fitted really nicely. And the coincidences, I had actually applied to St. Kate's when I finished high school in Venezuela.
Oh.
But my father
It was
didn't.
meant to be.
Exactly. 30 years later, I was at St. Kate's, It's like,
Beautiful.
it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. My dad didn't want me to come by myself to the U.S. He thought it was too free here. He liked the...
And you pursued a degree at St.
I did.
Catherine's.
I did.
In what field?
I just did, I was missing my Spanish literature very much. So I didn't really need a degree. I had a lot of experience doing what I was doing. So I did it for my own pleasure and to get the degree. So I did a lot of Spanish. So I did a lot of Spanish literature, and I loved that.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like things that I had not learned because I had left Venezuela, right out of high school, things that you maybe learn in university in Caracas. I was just, so it was so fun for me to do that. So I got all those classes taken, and then of course I had to finish the requirements, which were not as much fun, but they were still, it was fun. It was a good, and they have a weekend college. And so I attended weekend college for several years because I was newly married, so I didn't want to spend all my time in the books either. So I took 1 or 2 classes a semester, and it was a wonderful experience.
It's a nice pace to allow you to enjoy your learning.
Right.
Because you're not driven by the degree as much as you're relaxing into enjoying.
You are correct in that. I did what I wanted to do, and that gave me a big, pleasure, learning and pleasure to learn what things, Spanish literature. I had 1 year Spanish literature in high school in Venezuela at the most. So it was very good for me.
And probably that felt good for you
Oh my
because
gosh, yes.
that is a way to reconnect with your culture.
Exactly.
Which is, you know, a lot of the activities I do is because of that reason. I miss my home. After being here for so many years, I still miss my home. I travel to my home, and you know, I am privileged that I am able to go back and forth freely.
Right.
And that things are relatively peaceful there, where I can still visit several times a year if I can. But I know that connection is so important, and it never leaves you.
Never, never. Your soul is always not totally there, but very much there.
There's always a part of you that says, do you get to go back recently, or is that more difficult now?
No, now it's very difficult. I used to be able to go back sometimes, usually for Christmas, but sometimes for my mom's birthday, which was July. And many times I send my children to Venezuela because I wanted them to get to know the culture and get to know the family. And they did. So the three of them are Spanish speaking. Two of them, well, my daughter is like, you would think that she was Venezuelan when she speaks Spanish, because she also went back and lived for 2 years in Venezuela and worked there. And my youngest one also has it perfect. So the middle one is the one that has the least. He's the one that had the least contact with the family in Venezuela. But yes, I wanted my kids to know how I grew up. And that was very important. And they're very attached to the family. So that was very important for me.
You know, it's probably not only difficult to go today, but it's also very risky.
Oh, no, you can't go now.
Yeah, it's
Last time I went
very
was
dangerous.
because when my mom died, and that was 2009. And
Those
I
10
mean-
years.
yeah, when we went to the cemetery for the funeral, these paramilitaries were around us, you know, in the motorcycle doing wheelies in the cemetery. And I had my son who had 4 kids with me in the car. I was so afraid that something would happen to him. And then what about the 4 kids that he had? You know, so I have never gone back. Now, we are all hoping that at some point we can go back. And most of my cousins are all gone. I have cousins in Chile, in Peru, and in Colombia. My siblings, I have 3 siblings that are in Spain. 2 of them live in Madrid, and 1 lives in the Canary Island, which is where my grandparents' parents came from. So it's interesting, you know. Now you can become, if you are Venezuelan and you have ancestors that are Spanish citizens, you can become a Spanish citizen, and that's what the 3 of them have done.
That's
Actually,
nice.
Very nice.
Because that gives you options.
Are there people still leaving the country?
Anybody that can is leaving, and people are actually walking from Venezuela through Colombia to go to Peru. And you know, some of them don't make it because they don't have the proper clothing to be crossing the mountains or any of that. So it is amazing what people, well, you have to do it. If you don't have food for your
You're
kids,
desperate.
you have to do it. I mean, there's no other way.
Yeah, you hear and you see the news that the shelves at the grocery store, the shelves at the drugstores, everything is empty. And it's just, how do people make it? Or people going through garbage cans to eat? People are surviving on mangoes. This is mango season.
Yes.
And they're eating a lot of mangoes. Thank goodness for nature.
Thank goodness for nature.
And probably that's the way, you know, some people are living, but you have to have a balanced diet to be able to be healthy. And if you get sick, then you die because there are no resources.
No medicines.
And then there's medicine. You don't
There's
have
no
medicine.
No, that's people are dying. You know, little kids, babies are being born, and they are these skinny little kids, and they don't survive very well. And you know, food is so important when children are growing up. I mean, changes. It's going to be a whole generation that went hungry in Venezuela. And what the consequences of that is, it's going to be huge for the country.
And we watch the news from Latin America and Latin American news in Spanish. They are totally different to what they show in English. They are not the same as the NBCs of the world, the national news in English. In Latin America, they're more graphic. They show more of the things that they don't show here. So I saw some really horrible things happening, being done by the military, by the government, to the people.
Yeah.
It's just very heartbreaking, and it's hard to see that.
It is terrible to see.
It's also not a unique story. I mean, so many countries
Exactly.
are going through
Yes.
that kind of upheaval, the kind of
Yes.
dispersal of human wealth and human resources because people have to leave. It makes us wonder about this time on the planet.
Exactly. It's like the bad forces of the world are really getting hold of us, you know, because it's all over the place.
It's very similar to what happened in Cuba, to
Exactly.
what keeps happening in Cuba, and now we hear that Nicaragua is going in that direction, which is scary, right?
Yeah, because they were there once before. Nicaragua was. Yeah, it is very scary.
Yeah. So there are so many different scenarios, but the similarities are there because of political influences, and you name it. Latin America as a whole has been very volatile. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We've had a great time learning about Venezuela in general, about you. We're very grateful. I would like to thank my co-hosts for being with us today. Don Semerit, Nadia, thank you. And to you, Nora, it's been a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. Until next time.